Hi, welcome back to the podcast. In today's episode, I'm talking with Andy, and for reasons that will become apparent, we won't be using his surname, just to preserve his anonymity. Andy joined the Royal Artillery in 1982 and served initially with 5 Regiment in Germany, before moving back to the UK after being posted at Topcliffe. It was here he decided to leave the army and join the police. While serving with the police, he decided to join the RUC and then later applied to join E4A, whose primary role was surveillance and to provide intelligence to the RUC in Special Branch. Today Andy tells us what it was like serving in Germany, moving back to the UK and serving with the RUC during the Troubles in Northern Ireland and serving in such a special unit. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Today I'm talking to Andy. Andy served with the Royal Artillery and then moved on to bigger and better things, but we'll let him explain that. Hi Andy, how are you doing?
Yeah, fine, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate it and thank you for coming on. So if we can start with the normal questions really that I ask everybody else. Can you just tell us a bit about where you grew up and why you joined the army?
Yeah, I grew up in the northeast of England, small town. Left school 1982, not a lot of work about. And there was a big push. Well, my mum wanted me to stay on and do A-levels. Dad wanted me to get an engineering apprenticeship. And I just wanted to initially join the Navy. I'd watched all this stuff down the Falklands. A couple of guys in years above me had joined the Navy. So went and got all the paperwork, looking all through the stuff. And the big thing that came out was this, when you got in your first couple of weeks, you had to go and have a full dentist exam. And I hated the dentist, even though I went regular. So I thought, I got the army paperwork and that never mentioned the dentist. So I thought, well, that'll do for me. And life choice was made on this dental phobia. And of course, as soon as you get into basic training in the army, week 2, along to the dentist. So I might as well have joined the Navy, you know. But went into the local careers office, as you do. And as everybody wanted to do, I think back then, was join Para-Reg. You know, everybody had seen what they'd done in the Falklands, the unbelievable Goose Green and Longdon. And there was a light infantry colour sergeant in there. And he's like, "No, you don't want to do that." He said, all they do is just go to battle by a different means. At the end of the day, you know, your scores on your tests, you don't want to be infantry, and that's what they are. He said, if you get yourself a trade, and if you want to go down the airborne route, you can do it at a later date. So followed his advice, and I put down, I think, for Air Corps, some kind of trade in the Air Corps, and of course, they never had them available. Oh. And the choices were junior leaders, Royal Artillery, junior guardsman, junior infantryman, or junior paratrooper. So, sticking with his advice, I went with the artillery, and he said, "Oh, you know, you good chance you can be a surveyor or whatever." So off I went to junior leaders September 1982. And that was a huge eye-opener. You know, done the research as you could then. You know, you'd seen all this adventure training, travelling. You'd seen all the sort of the M109s, all the kit they had. Yeah. And then spent the first 6 weeks in coveralls, cleaning the block. You know, bullet boots, ironing, and it's just like, nobody ever mentioned that. It was probably a naivety on my part. You know, the block jobs, you know, getting up, you know, 5:30 in the morning, having to do block jobs before going to the cookhouse for breakfast, finishing them off when you got back. Yeah. That was just like, you know, luckily we had probably about a dozen guys who'd been in cadets, and they were able to really help with the boots and the kit and that.
Yeah, we had a few lads like that. Yeah, we were quite lucky. There were 3 or 4 lads in the troop who were cadets, And yeah, don't do it like this, do it like this. And some of them are helpful, some of them are knobs, and they just
Yeah,
keep it to themselves. But it is what it is. It's funny you mentioned that about the air corps though, 'cause that's exactly what happened to me.
yeah,
I went to Crews office in Hartlepool, and was joining out. I had posters on my wall as a kid of helicopters, and I wanted to be a Lynx pilot. Never going to happen. But I got all the way down to Sutton Coldfield, and they went, "Oh well, actually, there's no places this year for the air course, so you'll have to pick something else." And I was like, "What?" Because I didn't even consider anything else. And
yeah.
went, "Here, have a read of this." Read this little booklet at Sutton Coldfield, and this officer says, "What do you think of that?" And I thought, "This is mint. It's adventure training." So I was going to go yachting, and I thought, "Yeah, I'll do that." Next thing you know, I'm in the artillery. So
Yeah.
sorry, I just didn't rub that a bit.
No, I think it was easier getting in the Masons than it was getting in the Air Corps back in the early
And
80s.
there's other people who've come on a podcast exactly the same thing. There's at least three of them have all said, "I want to join the Air Corps." And they all ended up in the artillery. So I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, and my first posting to Germany, we shared the camp with Air Corps, and they did I think they did like one guard a month, and we pulled all the other guards, and I was still thinking, geez, I wish I'd been in the Air Corps, you know. Just think that it seemed to have a better standard of life, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But no, juniors was a huge eye opener. You know, we were back then. I think we were 12 to a run.
Yeah.
And we moved block about 3 times, so we were like traveling people. You know, it was just. And I struggled with the coordination on the marching. That's why I've never been a dancer. You know, but the PT and that found that okay, and basically we had 2 really good troop sergeants, both from 4th Field when 4th was in the airborne role.
Yeah.
And you couldn't have asked for a better start. And I think the whole junior system as it was then, when you had junior leaders for artillery, you had junior infantry, junior engineer, you know, that system just grounded you and set you on the right path. You know, that mixture of drill, adventure training, military skills, map reading, education. It was just a really good, well thought out package.
Yeah.
And I know people now, you know, I talk to people whose, you know, sons and daughters are in the military now. And one of the huge problems they've got is isolation and loneliness in these single person rooms, where they cook their own food and, you know, they disappear in the room with their Xbox. And a lot of the mental health problems that are in the military in the early days now are from this isolation, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I've spoken to people who are serving now or working in, I wouldn't say serving because they're not, but they're working on in barracks, you know, doing civvy jobs and stuff like that. And I was surprised to find out, like, on the last camp I was at, you know, the naffy bars shut. I was like, what? And I was like, yeah, there's no bar. The sergeant's mess bars are shut. The officer's mess bars shut. They probably
Yeah.
maybe it's once a week, maybe it's once a month for a function or whatever. But on a night time, the young ones are just finishing work, going to the rooms. You don't see them again until the next morning. I was like, what? You know, it's alien to me, but I mean, it's the way they are at the moment, you know, and it's a different generation, I suppose, but I don't think it's right.
No, it might be a different generation, but the job itself requires you to work together as a team, and a lot of the strength in the military is that bonding, be it over a beer, be it on the sports pitch, or like when I got to my regiment, you know, you'd have bimbled across to the cookhouse together as maybe 8 or 10 of you, and again it was a social aspect of walking there, eating together, a social aspect of walking back. And I think, as you know, maybe another issue is with most of the military now based within the UK, everybody bomb bursts at weekends and goes and does their own thing. Where, as you know from your time in Germany, you know, that rapport and a lot of the friendships were built on the socializing in outside of the camp in Germany in large groups. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the battery, but especially in Germany, you'd have stuff like the battery bars, and it instilled more. The unit, the subunits, the batteries were more gelled, and
Yeah,
you had the rivalry in between each other and stuff like that, and then you had the rivalry of different regiments and stuff, and it was a bond. I mean, like if you were, if you were in a shit in the bar on a night downtown in Germany, and someone was uh, going to fill you in, you knew your mates had your back. Even
yeah,
if you were in
yeah,
the same regiment, it'd be that battery against that battery. That'd happen. And
yeah,
if the Lancers came in, and then oh no, there's them two batteries against the Lancers. All the rivalry
yeah,
was there. But yeah, you're right. It's that bond that you have. It's like the cliched word of the brotherhood, but it is. It is. And now I don't see. I mean, I don't have that much experience with the armed forces now, um, but I just can't see it the way that it used to be. You know what I mean?
yeah. I totally agree. And I just think that it's another downside of the shrinkage in the armed forces, you know?
Well, we've digressed there a little bit, and
So, I was meant to go to 2-2 locating down at Lark Hill when I got my posting. Not sure how that came about because it wasn't on any of my lists, but there you go.
yeah.
And all the guys who were going to Germany, they got their MFO boxes and off they went. And I'd stayed on and done Controop. I can't remember why that came about, whether I got picked or I don't know. Anyway, so I did Controop. So it's January '84. I've been away Christmas leave, come back, and all set to go down to Lark Hill. And then the night before, somebody came into the block, asked for me, said, "Oh, there's a mistake in your posting. You're now going to 5 Regiment, Hildesheim, Germany." I was like, "Well, where's the MFO? Oh, you're not getting MFO boxes. Just see what you can scrounge bag wise and pack as many bags as you can." And that was basically it. So off I went to Germany, and another eye opener, arrived at the guard room in 5 Reg, and there was an orderly officer on at the time, and the orderly officer had given a lecture when I'd been in juniors. He'd been 12 air defence down the Falklands, and he sort of recognised me, and he sort of took me up to RHQ because apparently they weren't expecting me. So just and I got assigned to gun battery. Walked into see the BSM, and he said, "What's your trade?" I said, "Driver signaller." And he said, "Well, you're no use to me. I need guys on the guns." And I think this must have been I think about Thursday.
Yeah.
He said, "If that's the case, you're going skiing on Sunday. You're going down exercise Snow Queen," and that was it. So I left his office, sort of quite bewildered and thinking, how come I'm going skiing and everyone's going to hate me because I've just arrived and sent me on a skiing holiday, not knowing that how Snow Queen operated, that it was there for anybody who wanted to go, and there was always loads of spaces. So I begged and borrowed some kit to go down with, and ended up down to 2 weeks in Snow Queen, which was quite good as well, because I think there was about 4 or 5 guys from the battery on it, and then yourself from Snow Queen, you get then introduced to other guys from other batteries within the regiment. It was a great 2 weeks down there. But what also happened while I was down there was an old Sergeant Major X148 battery down there from 5 Reg, and he was the head of training for Special OP Troop, which I'd never ever heard of. Anyway, while I'm down on Snow Queen, he's chatting away and saying, "We've got some vacancies, and why don't you come along and have a tryout? We're always looking, young guys." And everything he told me about it sounded really interesting. So I thought, you know what, I'll have a look at that. And he said, "But you see, when you go back and you ask to come across to us," he said, "they'll tell you can't come." He said, "But it's your right." He said, "It's the same as going for 2-9 or 7th. They cannot stop you going. So when they tell you you can't go, just say that actually, is your right to apply for it. So, of course, come back off skiing and pop in to see the PSM. How was your snow? I love it. So I'd like to go and try on selection for Special OP Troop. He's like, what? You're not going? And I said, well, Sergeant Major said that you would say that. My right to go. He said, I'll tell you what, you need to reflect on this. Take 6 extras and reflect on on your decision. So I went away with 6 extra guard duties to do. Came back and thought, you know what, I better let this one sit for a while.
Yeah.
So I came back and they said, have you reflected? I said, yes, I have. I'm going to leave it a while. He says, oh, that's good. He says, and by the way, you're off again on Snow Queen. He said, it's just still no use to me. So he sent me on another Snow Queen. And I was basically just biding time until I got to the guns courses. So I think back then, they used to do the trade courses around about March time, right. April, I think.
Yeah.
And I got put onto a guns course and then assigned to an M107, which was just brutal.
Yeah.
Absolutely brutal. You know, I mean, people go on about the selection process to get into, you know, be it 297th, SRR or Hereford, but the life of a gun bunny on an M107 is absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything is heavy. Everything is just on a gigantic scale. And, you know, a night move in Germany in the winter at round about 0 or -5 and 35, 40 miles an hour on the side of a gun is, you know, just absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
Chills you to the bone, you know.
If anyone's listening to this and they don't understand about an M107, it's a very large piece of metal that's got no cover, and it's, you know, it's a huge gun, absolutely huge, but there's no cover on it, so the crew's sat on top of it more or less. And it's, you know, luckily I've never worked on one, but I know, you know, the closest I would have come to being stuff like that, because I was on the Abbott, or we went from the Abbott to the FH70, and you stuck out in, you know, they stuck out in the rain and that and stuff like that, and that's quite brutal, but for different reasons. But I'm so glad I'd never worked on an M107. Really, really glad.
We did a winter exercise, and they had these huge cam nets, which they used to, for store, they used to be rolled up on top of sort of a third of the way up from the breech on the gun, sitting on top of the barrel. And there was that much ice in it that they needed an Eager Beaver forklift truck to lift the cam net off the side of the gun. It's just, you know.
I mean, how heavy are the shells for them?
So, and this is how brutal it was. I can still remember. I think it's 147.5 pounds per shell.
Jesus.
And the charge bags came in at about 96 pounds.
Christ.
And they used to drop off the shells for live firing centrally.
Yeah.
So they weren't delivered just to the gun. And they would come in on a stalwart, and you walked across, and they would roll them off onto your shoulder, and you had to carry them on your shoulder. Well, I saw that, you know, in 70 kilos wet through, you know, 5'8" on a really good day, and if you don't get it balanced right, it's literally, you know, backbreaking work.
I don't know.
And then you would see.
I don't know how true it is, bro. I remember when I was in juniors, we had a couple of we had the troop sergeants, and then another one came in halfway through because he was taking over. But and he was from 5 Reg. He was a little stocky guy. I can't remember his name. 30 odd years ago, Nugent, I think it was.
Yeah. The name sounds good. I think I can picture him as well.
Yeah, little stocky guy, and he said, right, and he went round the troop, and he goes, right, well, you're going to 5 Reg, you're going to 5 Reg, and it was all the little guys, all the little stocky guys. And we were like, well, why are you picking them and no one else? He goes, because you won't be able to carry the shells. They can. And I was like, what's going on here? You know, I didn't understand until later on that, he was going to, all the little fellas go to 5 Reg. I don't know how true that was or how necessary it was.
We had a huge man mountain of a guy in the battery, I think he worked in the stores, and he could carry one on each shoulder,
Yeah.
which is just. But I hated my time on the guns. Absolutely hated it, It was just wasn't for me. But the guys that I did work with on the guns, and I know everybody calls them gun bunnies, but to me that's a term of affection and a term of absolute excellence for what they did. And I think they wore it with a badge of pride as well.
Yeah, I mean, I never got offended by being called a bunny. I used to get a bit annoyed sometimes when you'd wake up in the morning, the OPs had been through the position and thrown carrots down the barrels and stuff like that. It's just a bit of banter, and there's nothing personal about
it. It is banter, but for anybody who hasn't worked on anything, on the big guns like a 107, 110, and I would say even sort of FH70, M109, where you got the 155 shells. It's all manual physical work, and the pride that the guys took in maintaining their gun, and the quickness that they could bring it into action. And when you saw the same guys in camp, they were probably some of the scruffiest people you see around camp. And the other thing, they had no real ambition to be anything other than maybe a number one on a gun, or even just the layer of the gun, the number 3 seat. Because they lived and breathed the guns, and I think one of the strengths as well in the regiment at the time was the consistency and the continuity you had by having the same amount of people doing the same jobs and being really, really happy in their work and what they did.
It's funny you mention that about the ambition of the crew to be the number one or the number 3, the layer. I must have, when I got sent to a gun battery from HQ back because I was a clerk to start with, and I was a shit clerk, and I was sacked. So I was sent to the battery, gun battery, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And it's where I met my mentors then, the people I look back and look up to. It was them guys there and the crew, and it was, as a young gunner, humping ammo and stuff like that. My ambition there, then I only had one. I wanted to be the layer. I wanted to be sat in the layer's seat. And I didn't even have any ambition to be a number 1 because in the end, I really wanted to be a signaller. But I wanted to be the layer. I wanted to be a layer. And it was everyone in the crew wanted to be, and that was the position to be. You were the one that was looked after by the number 1. But it's amazing. Again, we're going back to what we said earlier about the brotherhood, and the competition between the crews. So each crew wanted to be the best and to be better than A sub, C sub, and wherever. But it was also the pride that you had in your gun, like you were saying there, the pride that they got.
Absolutely.
It was our platform. Officers didn't just walk under the cam net. That wasn't allowed. And when the first time I'd seen that, I was like, what's going on? The gun position officer coming to the BC would stand up for permission to come on the platform. And sometimes the number 1 would just ignore him. Finish his brew, he's not coming on yet. And then he'd invite him on. Because they just walk on,
Absolutely. And I know that, like you say, the OPs and other branches of even of the army or the regiment that had other sort of, if you like, less arduous jobs, look down on the bodies. Was always considered to be, what should we say, intellectually challenged. But it wasn't the case, And I think one of the things since, in recent time, when I look back on it, one of the things I sort of liken it to is, I think it's a quote from Wellington when he looked at the infantry at Waterloo, and he said, I don't know what they do to the enemy, but they scare the life out of me.
Yeah.
And that, and I think he called them the scum, but as a term of endearment, not as a derogatory term. And I think when you look at the gun bunnies of the 80s and that period, they were just absolutely outstanding, and then they proved themselves in the first Gulf,
Yeah, totally agree with that. Yeah. So how
So,
long were you on the guns for then?
so I was on the guns for that most of that first year, but obviously, probably like you and your clocking, I wasn't very good at it. So when Lionheart came up, I was on rear party. But just before that, I'd seen this thing came up on regimental orders about the BAUR, British Army of the Rhine tennis championships. And I thought, well, I played a bit of tennis, so put my name down. Anyway, next minute I was off to Rhine Darling to play tennis for 2 weeks, and I did okay out of it. So then they sent me to play in Berlin at the time, so I got to travel on their military track. Got to Berlin, which was absolutely mind blowing. To see the difference and to travel along the corridor.
Yeah.
So I came back and they put me on rear party for Lionheart. So it was just basically day on day off guard. And this night there was a knock on my door, and they were sending 3 guys to Cyprus to do this thing called the Cyprus Walkabout. It was a run from sea level at the Pescape up to Troodos. You sleep up Troodos, run back down the next day. About 30 miles each way.
Yeah.
And one of the guys who was meant to go couldn't go. So there was a knock on my door, and he said, "Do you want to go to Cyprus?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll go." Right, pack a bag. You're leaving this evening. And it's like, "Well, why me?" And he said, "Well, everybody's on Lionheart, and you play a bit of tennis, so you should have some form of fitness." And these other 3 guys have been training for ages. so they flew us back to the UK, and because Lionheart was on all the troop movements, we flew into Heathrow, and they had a military sort of reception area at Heathrow, and they were flying guys out to reinforce Lionheart. And then they sent us up to Lincolnshire, up to RAF Binbrook, and out to Cyprus. So I had 2 weeks out in Cyprus, and then came back. And then they said, "Well, you're not really enjoying the guns, but you're getting the battery notice, with this tennis. What course would you like?" So I thought, well, a technical assistant Royal Artillery gets you a jump in pay and gets you into the command post. So I put in for that, and early '85 I got that. But also selection for special OPs was coming up again. So I basically came straight off my Tara course and went in again to see the BSM and say I want to go. And this time I was more determined, and he basically reluctantly let me go, but said, "If you fail that course, your life's not going to be worth living when you come back here."
You're going to get 12 extras.
Oh, I'd have just been forever on extras because I'd taken the Tara slot, which the battery had lost. And they actually made me do a pre-selection selection because there was 3 guys wanting to go for it, and BSM said only 2 could go.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to do a pre-select day to get on the actual selection.
It's crazy because I've heard it. I've listened to the podcast we were talking about before we started tonight. The unconventional soldier ones. Little plug for them there. Everybody go and listen to them because they're absolutely amazing. And when they were saying about the early days and stuff like that, and then even in the mid '80s and about special OPs, nobody knew about them. I know that was the intent. Where every now and again you'd see it come up on orders, volunteers for it, and what are them? Who are them? The first time I come across them was when a guy we moved back to the UK, and one of the guys had come back from special OPs, and he'd been posted to our regiment. And it was like, walking around with a little triangle on his shoulder and everything.
Yeah.
None of us had any experience about them. We didn't really know what they were and what they did and who they were.
I know, and if I hadn't have bumped into that Sergeant Major down on Snow Queen, I wouldn't have known. I probably would have seen them about camp because you saw them. Once he'd made me aware of it, you'd see them come and go wearing all kinds of different uniform and belt kit, and and it looked appealing even though you didn't know much about it. I think it was about a 14 or 16 week course, you know. And I don't know how many we started off with, but there was eight of us. Eight of us passed, and four of us went to. By that time, they'd split the Special OP troop into two troops, 5 and 3-2. And the gun battery that I'd been in 5 Reg had been assigned to 3-2, so they sent me back to 3-2. So 4 of us went to 3-2, and 4 went to 5 Reg. And then, you know, you're into the troop and you're just learning new stuff constantly, you know. We ended up so when you come through the 14 or 16 week course, you're qualified as a basic special observer, and to get advanced you have to do 2 compulsory courses, which were held down in Bavaria and Weingarten at the Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol School. The first course that you have to do is Warsaw Pact Specialist Recognition.
Wow.
So you go down 2 weeks, and it's basically every vehicle, every uniform, every rank of all of the Warsaw Pact countries, not just the old USSR. It was Poland, it was Czech, it was West Germany, and there's constant testing on it. And we do, you know, as you know yourself, back in the day, you always did a bit of AFV recognition, and you knew your BMPs and your BTR 60s, 70s. But the depth they went, But the depth they went down there was the photographs they'd show you would be a partial of a turret, and you're looking for a different antenna or a box because or a configuration that denoted that was like a signature equipment. And if you saw that, it was an army or a front headquarters. And one of the hardest courses we ever did, you know, you burning the midnight oil, midnight 1 o'clock every single night, you know. So you do that course, and then the other course was a 2-week survival with resistance to interrogation. So you spend 5 days making an escape kit. You got to make a compass, make a silk map, and then the following week they send you on the run for 4 or 5 days, and then it culminates in a capture process, and then you do your resistance to interrogation, your stress positions, and your tactical questioning, you know.
So who was chasing you on that? Because it wouldn't have been like Brits.
I can't remember. It was a British Hunter Force.
Right.
Most of the time it was a British Hunter Force. So on the course, it's an international course.
Right, okay,
so we had Italians, we had a couple of Americans, some Belgians. There were a couple of RAF guys from the Special Forces flight who flew C-130s. In multinational course, but the interrogation side was always done by the Brits. So it was done at the time by Joint Service Interrogation Wing, but then they became something else. And you know, the interrogation, it was just freezing, absolutely Baltic, you know. You're weak on the run, so you're initially given a location to go to, which hopefully is on the silk map which you've made of your escape area. And with the silk map, they used to put it up 10 minutes every morning when you went in the classroom, and you couldn't make any notes, you couldn't copy it. You had to do it from memory, and apparently that comes from a guy called Ari Neve, who was the first British guy to escape from Colditz.
Yeah.
And when he was in Colditz, he had to go to the dentist, and the dentist was outside the castle. And while he was waiting to go in, there was a map of Germany on the wall. Of course, he couldn't make notes. So when he got back, he made notes, and then he kept making more damage to his teeth to keep going back until he got the full map. Wow. So they do something similar on the course. So you do your own silk map, and then each evening when you're on the run at last light, you report to a location where you meet an agent, and the agent gives you the location for the next night. So you're generally moving at night, lying up during the day. And then obviously everybody goes to a final RV where Hunter Force capture, and then you're blindfolded, plastic cuff, and away you go, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've only experienced it like once when we were out on exercise in Canada, and they're like, right, we're doing escape and invasion. All right, are we? Yeah, take all your kit off, and off you go.
Yeah.
Give us coveralls, and off we went. And it was I can't remember who the Hunter Force was. It was the infantry battalion that we were with. I think it was two Queens at the time. And they grabbed us, and me and me and two of my mates had doubled all the way around, and ended up back at the beginning. I don't know how we like we're back at the beginning. So we were in this compound, or laid up outside the compound, and there was a bunker going underground. You could see the four toppers pulling up, and they were dragging blokes out the back and then dragging them down into there, hooded up and stuff like that. We were thinking, fucking hell. So we had this really, really bright idea of sneaking over and nicking the four tonner and driving back to camp. So we crawled over. We laid underneath it for ages, and it's like no one's coming. And we jumped in the cab, no keys. We're like, shit, did anyone know how to hotwire one of these? And as we opened the door again, there was just a big ring of infantry blokes just stood looking at us like, shit, wait for them. Took us down into the bunker. And I mean, we were in there for it seemed like about 6 weeks, but we were probably in there for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe 3 at the most. But it was awful.
Yeah.
It was so real. But I mean, that was just a minute bit of it. What you've probably gone through on that selection, it'd be 10 times, 100 times worse than what we've been through.
They do put the white noise on, and you've got the stress positions, and after a while you adjust to that. But for me, it was I did mine. I think it was January, and it was just the cold. Your boots are off at this stage, and you just bare feet on this concrete floor in this old French camp, and your knees lock up. And I can just remember her teeth just chattering all. You were glad to actually go in for an interrogation, because usually that room was slightly warmer and somebody was asking you questions, and that took your mind off it, you know. And then you get a rest period during it, and I think it's like, I don't know, it's half an hour or an hour or something. But basically, all they do is you're in the seated position with your hands on your head, your back straight, and someone just comes and pushes you over onto your side, and that seems to be, that's your rest period. And then next minute, it seems like a minute, but it's probably about half an hour, or that the time they have to give you. Next minute, you're dragged back up, and that's it over. And I think they give you, I think we got one piece of stale bread and a bit of water,
Was it a high failure rate through that bit when, the guys had got all the way through to that? Was it a
No,
failure as well?
no, it wasn't, not within in our unit. There wasn't, and I don't know what the failure rate was in the school, but we benefited from all the guys who've gone before, and the guys that had gone before, they give you, they prep you, and it's just like, while you're on the run, keep yourself in the best condition that you can, because it's the run bits, the 5 days that you're on the run is not the important bit. The important bit is getting through that 24 hours. So, get as much food as you can while you're there. Keep yourself as warm as you can, and conserve as much energy as you can to be ready for that. And the guys had told us what to expect. I imagine, the early guys from Special Peace that went down there and faced it for the first time, and passed it, fair play to them. Because we had it way easier, because we knew, we basically questioned them, and they'd offered us all the advice. So we knew every aspect, because, I did course 5 in 1985. So, we'd had 4 lots down before that, and everybody would just fill you in. So we were way better briefed than the internationals doing it.
So when you joined the special OPs, I mean, I've spoken to guys who were in 7th, and after they've come out of P company, they feel as though that they've part of a brotherhood or whatever. Did you feel different to like the rest of the regiment, let's say?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because the nature of the role was totally different, and the whole mindset within the unit was different. So you come in and having just passed, and then a lot of the time you were meant to be in. So I think it was was 6 or 8 man patrols, but most of the time it was 4 or 5 or 6. We were struggling to get 6. One, because we weren't up to full strength, and there's always somebody away on courses and that as well. So, but you come in and you'd be loaned out to do different things for other units, or you would be sent to do exercises. But whenever a task came in, your voice would be heard as well.
Yeah.
So the patrol commander, who is meant to be a sergeant, but at the time most of them were just full screws, would say, right, this is a task, this is how I'm thinking of doing it. Anybody got anything drastically different from that? And you always got an input.
Yeah.
Might not be listened to, but you were there, and your view was counted.
They're very different to the mindset of a normal battery.
Absolutely. And then the other thing though, which they always did, is that as soon as you got in, you got allocated to a patrol, and straight away you got given the signals bergen, which was the heaviest bergen. So the last guy into the patrol before you was just waiting for the next selection to come through. You're now the signaller.
So how was life? How was life after you'd done your selection and got through and you were advanced? Yeah.
It was a little, to be honest, it was a little bit slow, because you imagine you've done this 16-week course, and then you've done your 2 bolt-on courses, and it's just been non-stop. Every day you're doing something, and then you're in the troop, and if there's no exercise on, then you're into your sort of day-to-day routine. And the day-to-day routine was, we used to go down, check the vehicles, do any maintenance on the Land Rovers we had, and that would be up to the classroom for an hour of recognition, Warsaw Pack recognition, NAFI break, and then an hour of Morse code, because Morse code was our backup to the first transmission. And again, absolutely hated it. We had 3 or 4 X148 guys with us who were just bouncing out 16, 18 words a minute. And the rest of us Neanderthals are struggling with 5s. Usually there was some form of PT in the morning as well, be it a run or something, And then the afternoon was more sort of admin type stuff, But generally, like I say, we were out on exercise, You would be sent up to look at wartime deployments. We always had an annual exercise against the air defence whirligig, where we played enemy against them, which was quite good. And then usually on a normal exercise, or when the regiment went down to Grafenwehr, we'd have a period where we play enemy against the gun batteries.
So when did I don't know how to phrase this question. Involvement with stuff like in Northern Ireland, because did you not have a role there as well?
Yes. So I'd only been in the troop a year, and at the time there was the only thing going for artillery was a PGF tour to the Maze, and some of the 5 Reg guys had jumped on a tour with another regiment in '85. So just as we were coming through training, because we saw them doing the training for it, and then 12 Air Defence were asking for volunteers to go with them, and there's 4 of us from 3-2 troop put our names down, and we ended up going out and doing a maze tour with 12 Air Defence. 2 of the guys that went were bombardiers, full screws, and then there was 2 of us gunners. So the full screws had a really easy time. Of course, us 2 gunners ended up, doing the towers. You know how you rotated between QRF, the maze, and patrols. That awful tally lodge where you spent time on standby.
It's just a shit tour, wasn't it? It was.
it was.
They
It
weren't like
was.
the towers. Did you have to do the runs round the wall? Keep up
Yeah,
the
yeah.
it-
I think you had to do so many laps a week or
yeah.
something.
We'd run round
Yeah.
and like there was that old guard room right at the very bottom or something. You'd run round and you'd get there and there'd just be a load of blokes in there having a smoke, waiting for the Land Rover to come round, and then jump in
Yeah.
further on the corner. Used to think
Oh,
bollocks.
we got a little bit lucky in that 4-5 Commando were up at Belfast at the time,
Yeah.
and they'd started their R&R pattern, and they were short, so they asked if anybody wanted to go up, and the full screw in charge of my brick from the troop, he went first, one of the first ones up there, and absolutely loved it. Yeah, I think he got about 5 days, maybe a week out of
Yeah.
it. So as soon as he come back, you know, he got me and he got the other guy on it. So we went up and we did 5 or 6 days up there, which was absolutely loved it, you know. And we were really trekked well by. It was Zulu Company 4-5 Commando where we went and we jumped in on. And again, very, very nervous about going with them because their expertise, professionalism, the training that they'd done, and the amount of time. And we were coming from Sanger bashing to next minute we're patrolling out on North Howard Street, doing New Barnsley, just totally different tour, and you had to be so switched on,
Very,
and
very different. Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed the time up there, with them. So came back off that and just got the head down, more courses down, LURP school. Got sent to 3-9 for my junior NCO's Carter, which was down in Senelager at the time. Obviously, because we were such a small unit, we couldn't run our own courses, so you always got farmed out to other regiments. So I got dropped off at Senelager, and we started this junior NCO Carter. And all the guys I'm with, every evening, there's a tap on the window and they're getting the lightweights passed through and boots pulled and everything, Anyway, I've just got what I've got. And these guys, fair play to them. It's all coursemanship, Anyway, it's about a week into it, we went to the NAFI. And while we're in NAFI break, the regimental police marched a prisoner in, and he was allowed a NAFI break. And he sort of got the next table over from me, and he says, "Do you not recognise me?" I was like, "Nah." He said, "You did a roadshow about joining Special OP Troop," and he said, "I've got my name down." He says, "But obviously I'm in jail at the moment, but I'm coming on the next selection when I get out. Do you need anything?" He said, "I'm on locker inspections every day. I've got loads of kit." I was like, "Yeah," I said, "I need lightweights, I need boots in here." He said, "Right, which block you're in, and I'll have it delivered." And every night I was back on level pegging. I got lightweights, I got boots, and he looked after me amazingly, And then while I was down there, I think it was maybe middle of the course. We went, on a Sunday, they marched at the church parade. Yeah. So marched the church parade, came out, we've been inspected, church parade, come back. And it was we didn't have an officer in no course, it was Sergeant Major. And he said, "Right, course is going well, really pleased with everybody. So all I want you to do the rest of the day, work on your locker layouts, work on the block, and we'll have an inspection first thing in the morning." So that was great. Everyone's cracking on. And there was another guy on my course who I'd been in juniors with. And he says, "Do you know the Ryan Army Summer Show's on today?" He said, "I'm going over the wall. I'm going to the Ryan Army Summer Show. Do you want to come?" I was like, "Well, I got no civvies." He said, "I will get you some civvies. Are you coming?" So we both went over the wall and went to the Ryan Army Summer Show. Of course, few beers, I checked my watch. I said, "Look, there's a chance they might pop round this evening. Just check on the block. We should get back." So we we got ourselves back to camp about 5 to 6, just to find the rest of the course lined up in 3 ranks outside the block. Full fighting order, ready to go on a two-day exercise. Of course, we got absolutely roasted on it, because we're half pissed. No kit packed. Anyway, off we went. Anyway, long story short, I still got top student on it. I haven't gone over the wall, But it changed times,
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, no, they wouldn't get away with it now, would they? I mean, it wasn't that bad, I suppose, and and what some stories I've heard about people and all that, it's not that bad.
I did.
Yeah, it's good though. I mean, yeah, it is a good one. Sneaking
It
over
was
the
just
wire
one
in
of those
Cardiff,
things.
that's a good one.
You just thought, you know what, we'll nip out for a few hours. It'll be, be fine, But and then, so I got we're getting top student. You got promoted on the square at the time. So and then back to special OP troop. That's sort of taken us 87. And in 88, we were due. They were starting to give the gunners proper NI tours at this point. So one of the big ones that was I think it was probably the first one offered, was up in Londonderry, and we were the whole regiment was earmarked for that, and I was looking forward to that. But at the time, I was seeing a girl back in England. She's putting some pressure on me to get posted back to England. So I had a word with the troop commander, and he said, "If you do this tour, and I'll get you a posting back to England." So that was the arrangement we had. Anyway, he went away to do his staff officers course, which is quite wild. And then the troop sergeant major we had, he said, "Do you know where our old troop commander is in?" I think it was 27 at Topcliffe at the time. He said, "I could give him a call. You might be able to get posted. See what or pick a battery." Anyway, he rang him up, and basically things happened quite quick, and I was like on the move in about 3 or 4 weeks.
It's not bad, though.
So I didn't go on the 88, 89 tour,
right.
And the guy who sort of moved into my slot within the patrol, he ended up getting killed on the tour in Northern Ireland.
Right. Okay.
And that sort of has stuck with me for a long, long time, because in my mind, I put him in that truck on that night, because I put him into that. He took my slot. Now, where I sat in the truck on that night, I might have been a different seat. I don't know, And I know, one of the guys who was in the truck that night, he changed position with the other guy who was killed after they got in the truck. And he has survivor's guilt as well. But it's one of those things that never sort of settled in me. So I got to 27 and hated every minute of it.
I was going to say, I can imagine going from what you'd been doing into just like normal regimental routine again with all the bullshit.
Well, one of the first things was the BSM tried to make me take my special OP badge off, saying it wasn't recognised by the army, which it was at the time, and that led to a few extras, I think, and then they put me on the OPs, but they never ever let me go on exercise, so it was just a pointless thing, So I was quite disillusioned. And when I'd been in Special OP Troop, I'd done quite a lot of med training, and I'd done a specialist patrol medics course down the Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol School, which was run by the American Green Beret Special Forces, and the flight surgeon on that, a guy called Alan Moloff, who ended up almost head of medicine for the US Army. He said, anybody who does the course and wants to come down and visit us for extra training afterwards, just get in touch. So I ended up going down to a place called Bad Tölz in southern Germany and doing medical training with the Americans, where at the time we weren't allowed to do IVs, we weren't allowed to do all that kind of invasive suturing, and the Americans just let us crack on. So did a lot of that stuff. So while I'm in 2-7, up on regimental orders, the med centre are looking for a medical technician. So I thought, you know what? You can stick your gun battery, you can stick your OPs, and I'll jump in the med centre.
So I forgot they did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up in the med centre, and the med corps sergeant who ran the med centre was really friendly with the Royal Signal sergeant in the regiment, who was in the process of going to Hereford on selection.
Yeah.
So I used to do do the sick call in the morning, and then in the afternoon, the signal sergeant would come in, and I would sort of give him a lot of my notes I had from special OPs, about 4-man teams, patrolling, and some of the drills that we'd done. And then the two of us would go for Bergen runs around, up around with the old White Horse at Kilburn and all that, So that passed the time. And I was also so disillusioned with that battery, and I thought the med centre's no future. So I applied to join a local police force, and I got my acceptance date, and I had my collar number, and then March the 8th, 1989, 2 guys were killed in Londonderry. And I had my day out due was I think about 4th or 5th of April. So I went in to see the adjutant to try and stop my sort of getting out, and he said, "Oh, paperwork's too far gone, you can't." So I ended up joining the local police, and this whole thing about putting Stevie into the truck that night, him taking my job, never sat well. So the minute my probation was up in the local force, which is 2 years, I started the transfer process to the Royal Ulster Constabulary.
That's a big step, isn't it? It's a big step.
Yeah, huge. Huge.
Yeah, I mean, just go back to joining the police force. Can you compare them? Could you compare the two, the police and the military? Was the style, the training, the mentality?
But back then, when I did it, they had national police training centres, and they were. I think there was one near Manchester. There was one in the northeast up at Durham. There was one Tullyallen in Scotland, and obviously the Met had their own. And they had a drill sergeant there, and the drill sergeant was always ex-guards, And it was quite, the drill was all a military drill, and they used to always pick. And there was at the time they hadn't gone down this graduate route, so they really embraced ex-military. So you would maybe have 7 or 8 classes in an intake, and the class would be 20 or 30, and you always had an ex-military as class leader, and he was in charge of sort of ensuring the drill was up to standard, and there was at least 2 clothing inspections a week. It was proper bull boots, razor sharp creases. There was show parades dished out, and so that side of it was good. Usually the PTIs were ex-military as well, so there's a decent standard of fitness, cross-country runs, gym work, and that, and then obviously a load of classroom work on the law side. But as soon as I got the probation up, I started the transfer process, and it took about 14 months, for the whole time to go through, to get a date to go across for an interview, and I mean that was quite bizarre in itself. At the time, there's very few flights to Belfast, so I got on this plane, and the plane just looked like a transit van with 2 wings stuck on the top. It was only about 15 seaters. And I landed at, well, they call it George Best Airport, but it was just a city airport there. It was just like a porter cabin airport. And I'd be told I would be met by a driver. And the RUC at the time had a whole transport department, so that, ferrying people around, just plainclothes cars, plainclothes guys. So this guy picked me up and he drove me to the section house at Antrim Road, and which was also an operational police station at the time, just sort of in that North Belfast triangle. And you got in, and he said, well, canteens in there, there's meal vouchers here, give you used to call them a white fiver, just got you a meal chit. And all on the walls were, don't use this gate, there'd been an RPG attack here, there'd been a gun shooting there, and it was just a different world. And I looked across, and one of the mobile support units were in for evening meal, and there's just like Heckler & Koch 33s lined up, MP5s lined up, body armor. And it's just like, this place was bound, it was such a buzz to it, And I was going to be staying there all night before the transfer process the next day. So they give me a single person room, and I just, bored stiff. Yeah. So I walked down into the ops room, and there was a duty inspector. And he sort of explained I was over on the transfer board. Was there any chance could I get a tour around? And he sort of scratched his head a bit. He said, well, hang on a sec, leave it with me. And he said, go and grab a brewer and I'll see what I can do. And then he come back, he said, look, you can't get out the truck and you can't go out from here, but I've got a Land Rover coming down from Old Park, but you've got to stay in the back. Whatever the guys get involved with, you just stay in the back. And he gave me some body armor and stuck me in the back of this truck, and then ended up going around Old Park, Ardoyne, Cliftonville, Crumlin Road, and that. Yeah. I was out for a couple of hours, and came back. And then next day went for the transfer process, which was the police PT test at the time was the beep. They moved on from the 1.5 miles to a beep test, so you had to get there was best effort on the beep test, maximum press-ups, maximum sit-ups, and then went for an interview, and then there'd be a medical. So I did the PT test, went in for the interview, and there was a female superintendent. So that's like crown to like a major in the army, and then a male superintendent. And the female said, "Oh, I can see from your time, you're already a police driver. You've had an attachment with CID. You've got good report. All this is really, really good. And I'm thinking this is a breeze, And she finished and she turned over to the guy, and the guy's like, "Why do you want to come here? Who do you know here? What family have you got here?" So I got no family. I don't know anybody here. He said, "Well, why should we give you a job? You're probably just coming here to settle some scores, and you'll be gone in like 2 years. Why should we invest money in you?" And he had a really, he had a point.
Yeah.
And I said, policing in the mainland, unless you go to London, if you're in the county force, you either go traffic or you go CID, and that's the only options open to you. And he said, here you've got so many specialist departments where you can just expand your career. And they said, besides which, when I came over last night, I could have sat in my room, but I went and saw Inspector, and I can't remember his name, went out on patrol. I said I was talking to the guys. One of the guys was full-time reserve who's going into joining the regulars and going into the training centre. And it was that night before getting that lookout in the truck, which I think swung the day. Yeah. But they didn't tell you at the interview, so I came out thinking I absolutely bombed the interview, So I went in for the medical, and I said to the doctor, no point giving me the medical. I said the interview was a disaster. I said, so I'm just going to head to the airport. He said, well, he said, I get £75 for every medical I do. So will you do the medical anyway? So I did it, and then about a month later, I got the letter through saying I was accepted. At which point my backside absolutely fell out, because it was like real now, and I just, at that point, you're thinking, what have I done here? You know.
So when you went over there to
And
do join the RUC, you obviously had to do the training there as well. Was that
yeah,
like
so
was
even
the guys there who were like fresh from the street as well?
yeah, so when I got over there, there was certain criteria that they brought up at the interview process. So if I was successful, I wouldn't have to do my probation again. I could specialize straight
Oh, right,
away.
okay.
They would honor my pay band from across the water, but I would have to do the training center again because Northern Ireland legislation was different. And plus, I'd have to do the firearms package. And also, they had, a whole load of tactical training.
Yeah.
So went across, did the training center, and the unique thing back then was you started on a Sunday, and the first thing you get on a Sunday is a full threat briefing by Special Branch, which was a real eye opener.
I can imagine it was.
I
Yeah.
mean, we used to get briefings in the military, but you're fairly safe within the compound on a night. All right, you might get something coming over, and you have to go out the gates at some point. But the threats that they were talking about, and the incidents that they were highlighting about people being partially followed home, and then a bit further and a bit further over a period of days, and then being shot on their doorstep, and all the other aspects of personal security, which in the military, when we'd done our tours, we weren't aware of
No.
the
No.
the intricacies of these. So you do that, and then on the first week they start firearms. So they split the intake. I think there's about 80 or 90 in our intake, and they split it into two halves. And half of it start firearms training on the Monday. With back then it was a Ruger revolver. They start on the Monday, classify on the Friday, and leave to go home on the Friday with a personal weapon, personal protection weapon. We were in the second syndicate, so we did it the following week. But basically, by week 2, you had the whole intake armed. So, the other thing you did on the Sunday, as well as the briefing, they swear you in as a constable. You've got to take the oath. So you're sworn in, and by 2 weeks, you're all armed, but not qualified, if you like, as an officer. But the threat was such that they had to give you the personal protection weapon.
I mean, we forget, even nowadays, people won't even realise, the younger generation, how dangerous it was.
Yeah. And I went in March '93, and in the February there'd been a guy. So when we got into the training centre, we had a senior squad, and in the February there'd been a guy from their senior squad killed in the February. And there was the recruits were a real mixture as well. So there's people who've been part-time reserve, people who've been full-time reserve, some ex-military, and then just normal people wanting to make a difference and stand up and sort of
How about
keep
people?
all right.
Was there a mixture of people from the divide, like the Catholics, Protestants? Was
We
it
we
more
we
distinct
did
with?
we had a small number of Catholics in with us, but the reason that Catholics, and this is one of the misconceptions, the reason that a lot of Catholics didn't join wasn't the sectarian nature of the force. It was because for them, and they had to be so courageous to join, because back then mainly the communities were divided. You either lived in, especially within the city, you lived in the Protestant area or you lived in the Catholic area. If you decided as a Catholic in one of those areas to join the police, then if that got out, the going home and seeing family and the duress and the intimidation that the family would come under would be horrendous. So one of the reasons the main reason that they didn't join was because of that. And the ones that did join were hugely courageous. And the Catholic officers that I worked with, I never saw them treated any different to anybody else. You didn't care whether the person beside you was yellow, black, pink, white, Catholic, Protestant, Hindu. As long as they had your back and you could trust them, that's the only thing that mattered. You know.
I know, but it's a weird thing to say, but like I mean, even the last tour I did, which was '97, you always like kind of considered. I don't know how to phrase this without sounding like almost racist. Not racist, but you always like viewed the Protestant paramilitaries to be on your side, if you know what I mean.
Well, they were less of a
They were
threat.
less. That's what I meant to say.
They were less of a threat.
Yeah.
And when I got into a different unit, we worked against both sides of the community, and both lots of paramilitaries. And whenever a job came in, you you put equal measure into catching both. We didn't care who we worked
No,
against
and
because
they were both
they
as
were
bad as each other.
they were both as bad as each other in different ways. I mean, probably the only extra satisfaction we got against working against Republicans, terrorists, was that we hopefully lessened the threat against the security forces.
Yeah.
That was the only sort of difference in the way that you felt about it. But when the jobs came in and it was against the UVF or the UDA, it got the same level of attention and professionalism, and if that was a task that you were given, that was a task that you were on. So you threw everything at it because one, if you get a result on that, then you get that one out the way, then you're going to get another task, or you'd be working simultaneously on tasks,
Yeah. I mean, it's not as if we preferred, or we weren't biased to either one of them. It's just that you felt, maybe it's just me. I don't know, but you felt as though, I'd be more comfortable patrolling down, say, the Crumlin Road than the Falls Road type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
And so when I came out of the training center, as I said, I was excluded probation. And while I was in there, I'd heard about this department called E Department. And E Department basically was run by Special Branch,
Right.
and they had two key elements to it. HMSU, Headquarters Mobile Support Unit, which in today's terms would be classed as specialist firearms officers. They're your sort of tier one, very highly trained. They do all the sort of interventions for hostage rescue. They're trained to assault planes, houses, buses, everything. The other arm was E4A, which was the covert surveillance side, which at the time were doing the similar role to the DET or SRR as it became. Yeah. So I got out my probation and thought, yeah, that's the reason I've come across is obviously I feel I owe a debt to Stevie's family. So let's get into a department where you can hopefully make a difference. So started looking into it, and at the time, even though you were excused probation, you had to have 4 years service before you could apply. So and my idea was I was only going to go over there for a couple of years till I sort of, if you like, had laid the ghosts to rest, and sort of was at peace with myself. So that was out the window. So in the intervening period, I jumped into an organisation called Close Protection Unit, looking after High Court judges, MPs, visiting government ministers, visiting royalty when they came over. And I did that for the next sort of 3 years, and then bang on my 4 year point, I applied for E department, and always being a bit cautious, I'd done a bit of research, and there was a physical selection to get into both units. But somebody told me that the HMSU one was harder than the E4 one, so I went for E4. Not never, I was never one of the fitness guys. I could run a bit, but weight carrying and load bearing and all that was never a strong point. Anyway, when I got on my selection for E4, there was a HMSU guy coming across, and when we finished the 8 days, I said to him, I picked this one because it was meant to be E. He said, I've done both now, and he said this was just as hard. And I think it varied who they had on the training team, you know. And the 8 days was I found it hard, but I was doing okay on it. In that, so they take you up there. You have to make your own way up there, and a lot of it is self reliance. So you turn up at Belfast at a central location, check everybody's ID, and then they tell you to be up at McGilligan, up northwest, and they give you a time period to get up there, and they give you a car, and you share with somebody to go up there and drive this car up there and see what happens when you get up there. So I'm driving up with this guy, and he says, "Is it your first time?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, it's my third time." He said, "I'm going to smash it this time." He said, "Came off after 5 days last time." He said, "No offense," he said, "but you'll be gone by tomorrow or the day after."
Confidence, yeah.
Oh, right, it did. Anyway, up we went, and 2 days later, he left with a supposed shoulder injury. So I think it was maybe mid-20s on our assessment of selection, and I think they ran three that year. 7 finished ours, and 3 of us got put forward for the course, 3 or 4. And then we started the course with about 20, and then I finished. And 4 of us finished the course.
Oh, so a bit brutal.
Yeah. The course was 18 weeks, and you do foot surveillance, mobile surveillance, camera work, specialist firearms, urban OPs, rural OPs, and then you do another phase within that 18 weeks, which is a little bit delicate to talk about,
Yeah. I was like, I know I said before we started doing this that I was a bit nervous of interviewing you because I know of your history. And I was thinking there's loads of questions I'd want to ask you. I mean, loads.
Yeah.
And I know I can't. That's the thing.
I know.
It's not that it's frustrating. It's just that, I'd love to know some of the things that we can't know. Especially. I mean, I was never a special soldier or anything like that, but I mean, I know things that I can't tell people. The guys who are listening to this, we all signed the Official Secrets Act, and we've all seen things, and heard things, and done things that we can't talk about, but not on the scale of what you guys have done. You know what I mean? Until I'd heard of you, and from the other podcast now, I didn't know that the unit existed. I'd nothing.
Yeah, I know.
No idea. And us being a soldier out in Northern Ireland, you're quite introverted. You're looking on what your unit's doing. You don't really appreciate all the other stuff that's going on around you. We could be out doing a patrol. As far as I know, you're in a ditch 2 feet away from us, type of thing.
Yeah.
You don't appreciate all the intelligence gathering machinery that's around there. And of course at the level I was at, like in Lancashire, it's not for me to know. As you go further up that food chain, you get to see different aspects. In the intel they need more than we did and stuff like that. But for I'm not trying to blow your trumpet, but Jesus Christ, you know what I mean?
but I think that's the same across the board, because when I finished my time across Northern Ireland, I moved back over to the mainland. I got chatting to a lot of Met guys, Metropolitan Police guys,
Yeah.
And I thought that we'd done some real jobs and some operations, and that we were, and you sort of think that you're at a certain level, but you realise actually you're in this little cul-de-sac,
Yeah.
and that outside of the cul-de-sac there's this huge big area. And I was hearing about deployments that they'd done across the globe, be it training or different things, and some of the exercises that they do, and flying planes in from other countries to simulate a hijack situation, working hand in hand with Hereford, and handing jobs over, and you're just like, but I was absolutely blown away by the things that they do, and I worked with a guy who set up the Sky Marshals program from the UK, as a PC, as a police constable. He sent after 9/11, sent across to the States, bounced around over there, put everything together, brought it back, designed a course, and rolled it out for the whole of the UK. And these were things that we were just cracking on doing what we were doing, and you just realise that sometimes you're really, really blinkered, and that you only see your own role, and you only see that little cul-de-sac that you're in, and you don't see all the other stuff, and you think, do you know what? Wouldn't have minded a couple of years at that, and yeah, it's just one of those things, But I mean, the course itself was brilliant. The instructors had seen and done everything, and you just were in awe of what they were teaching you, But the course, when you do the physical on the assessment, but the course is not very physical. Obviously, the OP stage, when you're having to, hump Bergens in and some of the weapon stage was a bit physical, but there was no regular PE in it or PT in it.
Yeah.
But you could be binned at any time, and the way they used to bin you was like really unnerving. So at the time, most of the force was still on Ruger revolvers, but because I was coming from a specialist unit, I had a semi-auto. We had Smith & Wesson 5904s at the time. So as you're going through the training on the course, they're also in spare periods doing weapon training to convert the other students to a semi-auto pistol from a revolver. So we're being weapon training this Friday. Come back and we're cleaning the guns in the classroom, and one of the instructors just pops his head around the door. He said, when you finish, can somebody bring the box of guns up to the armory? That's all he said. Closed the door, and then he just opened the door again. He said, in fact, I tell you what, Davey, you're sat there at the door. You bring the box of guns up, when they're done. And that was it. So finished cleaning the guns. Davey took the box up, and he'd been gone about like 20 minutes. Didn't come back. The instructor came in and said, "You'll not be seeing Davey again. He's been,
Yeah.
And it was just like that. And then every couple of weeks you had tutorials, and you go in, have a tutorial, they tell you how you do it, and then 4 weeks in, we got tutorials, and instructor sticks his head around the corner. You two there, your tutorials first. When they come back, you two over there, you just come up after them. And I went. As soon as they left, instructor back in. Actually, there's no tutorials today. Those two were binned.
Brutal.
The rest of you out in the car park, getting the cars we're going for
I suppose it was a
surveillance.
psychological trick on you as well.
And that was the thing I found the hardest, was not knowing when you're going to go or what's going to happen. Yeah. And luckily, like I say, got through to that. And when you get through, you do a year on probation when you get to a team. and I found that year really, really hard. I found I did really well on the course, but I found the operational side a lot harder because I got sent to a country team,
Right.
And the country team it's a lot harder finding lie-ups. It's a lot harder learning your trade, if you like. And as well as that, I had 70-mile each way commute to get to the office, and then you might find then that you would be deployed somewhere else. So you regularly doing 250 miles a day, you know. And that first year, I struggled with it, and I thought maybe this isn't for me, you know. And you're looking at your peers around you who are just unbelievably aware of everything. You know, their knowledge of the targets that you're working on, the knowledge of the local area, because we were working up the northwest and down in Fermanagh, and you're just playing catch up. And I was just thinking, I'm just so far off the pace on this. But the criteria you had when you got in, because I said I would serve anywhere but north, and they sent me north. But they were pretty good. They said, if you do a year up north, and when the next course comes through, we'll have you replaced. And they sent me back. And when I came, sent me back to Belfast, and I said to myself, I didn't say to anybody else, but I said to myself, I'm going to give it 2 months down here, and if I don't think that I'm improving, then I'm going to walk away and do something else within the RUC. And coming back to the city was just like night and day, you know. I found it so much easier to pick things up. And looking back to that period, really, they would have been better sending all new people to city teams to learn their craft a little bit more, where you've got that little bit more scope for finding lie-ups and finding your way about, you know. But I came back, and then that's when I really started to think I was actually deserving to be in the unit, you know. The first year, I very much felt imposter syndrome, you know. Yeah, massively, you know. And you sort of doubt everything then, you know.
I've got one question for you,
Yeah.
and you don't have to answer this one because it's probably just a shit question. How did you deal with your accent?
Really good. So, you'll not believe this, but pretty much within about 18 months of being there, I picked up a local accent. You know, and I get it all the time now from my wife. She said, you know, if I go across and visit, she said, I can tell straight away, even if you hadn't told me you'd been across, you know, you've gone back into it, you know.
So you blended it.
Yeah. Now saying that, it was never ever. I never thought it was good enough to pass myself off in, say, Crossmaglen or sort of some New Barnsley area or that. But you know, I would quite happily go into places on the fringes, you know.
Yeah.
And you have to anyway, you know. But yeah, you get a picture. I mean, even my child had a really good Northern Ireland accent, and then now there's no trace, you know.
Yeah. I don't know. You had a little bit of a twinge then when you started talking.
I know. I was just trying to word how, you know, trying not to give too much away there, you know.
Yeah.
But no,
sorry, go on.
You know, you did pick it up, you know, and then, like I say, when I got back to the city, I just found I was really learning more. I think as well, not traveling so much, so I tended then to socialise a bit more with the team I was in, and there was some unbelievable operators in there that had been in right from the very start. You know, some of the stuff that they were sort of telling you just like unbelievable. You know, you think of some of the big jobs in the 80s that the guys had been working on, and that, and some of the targets that they were working on, and it's stuff that you've read in books, you know, and you sort of sat with these guys, and again, the imposter syndrome sort of sneaks in again, because, very much I was late to the party. I mean, I got there in '93, and I didn't get into the unit till '97.
Yes,
And
the Good Friday Agreement was just around the corner, wasn't it?
Yeah, and when I was in the close protection unit, I've been looking after politicians that were involved in the talks process. So I had seen that side of it. But the guys I was working with and the girls I was working with, had been through the '80s, the really, really dark days when the department had been first set up, and it was finding its way and morphing into this unbelievable, efficient, intelligence gathering, and operational unit.
Would they have got, like, so in the early days, would they have got lots of influence from, say, 14 Int and stuff like that?
So the DET worked their targets, and E4A worked their targets, and everything came into a central, what was called TCG, Task and Coordination Group, which was run by Special Branch. So they got all of the information, and also Special Branch then would get all of the information from intelligence from the Green Army coming in, from P checks and everything, and everything was fed into this hub, and then people would sift through it and put the bones of a job together, and they would decide who was worth looking at and who wasn't, and then you would divide that up between the resources available. So, I don't know how many surveillance teams that the DET had at the time, but they would each have their own targets. We'd have our targets. And like I say, everything was coordinated by Special Branch and TCG. And they were just, and one of the things now which I sort of, it winds me up a bit, is when people are now looking back at historic things from Northern Ireland. And yes, we had these amazing units. Yes, we had this brilliant intelligence apparatus, but you also had a lot of active terrorists, and there's only a small amount of resources. So obviously, imminent jobs and jobs which look like the intelligence is really, really accurate on, then they're going to be divided up between the specialist units. Outside of that, then you've got other threats coming in, and other intelligence. It's maybe not coming in from a reliable source. It could be first reporting, but they've still got to be prioritized. So then you can maybe put in a VCP pattern and try and disrupt it, or you can put a patrolling pattern in and try and disrupt it. But then you'll always have not enough resources to cover all the threats coming in. So when people now, or politicians are looking back, or analysts are looking back and saying, well, these people are allowed to die and these people are allowed to live, it wasn't like that. It was just, these are the resources, this is all of the intelligence. Somebody has to decide who gets the resources.
You've got to prioritize,
good. They did a pretty good job at what they did.
Sometimes we get set on patrol and think, why are we walking around here? There's nothing here. And it could be coming down from that, and it probably was, to just say, a presence in that area where we'd not been for years. Especially, we were on the maze tour. We got sent up to these farms in the middle of nowhere, and walking into the farms, there was like no one there apart from one old bloke who couldn't speak English. He spoke Gaelic, but he didn't speak English, or he said he didn't anyway. But he had no gas, he had no electric, or nothing. Up in the Oolings. And we were thinking, what the hell are we doing here? And it's for an obvious reason, or in the end.
Just one of the things you say that about the maze tour. When I was on the maze tour, when we were doing out in patrols, we got sent out to this judge's house to check on it. I don't know whether you did or not.
On the side of the M1?
Where you crossed the M1 and you went down these lanes. Anyway, when you got to it, there was a lane going uphill, and he had this bungalow up on that. And that turned out to be the Lord Chief Justice, Sir Brian Hutton. So I was doing that in '86, and fast forward to '94, and I'm picking him up from his house to drive him to work when I was in the CPU. I ended up looking at, and and it was just like small things that go around, and you know, and you just think, I'd have never ever have thought that in '86 when we used to drive and check on his static guard and make sure everything was okay, that 8 years later you'd be back there.
Yeah, I remember walking around the grounds thinking, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah,
But no, I do, yeah, I remember that, yeah. Wow. Just forgot
yeah.
all about that
And you
place.
just, I know, it's the things that just, they come back
Yeah.
to you. But no, the time over there, I enjoy. I ended up staying 22 years. So
Wow.
yeah, once I got into the department, I did the next 17 years in the department. And you just bounce from one job to another. And what people as well don't realize, and it's another thing, and I'm going to digress slightly here. They're always going about policing numbers here in the mainland. I think back in the day when I was there, the overtime that was done on a daily basis was something crazy, like the equivalent of 6,000 extra officers a day. You know, I mean, we were regularly hitting 100, 150 hours, 200 hours overtime wouldn't be unheard of. In a month. You know,
Christ.
um, and you weren't forced to work that. The work was there, and you don't want to be watching something develop on the news on TV and miss out on it. So, and a lot of times you went in and jobs fizzled out. For numerous reasons, nothing ever happened.
I think
But
they were the frustrating ones.
but the difference when I was in the police in the mainland was, oh, we need you to work on, but we can't pay you. So are you happy that we just give you for time off? Yeah, policing regulations is it's your individual choice whether you work overtime for payment of time off. But the mainland was, well, we can't pay you, but need you to work on. So are you happy to do it for time off? And across the water, you put nothing in for time off. You always you always took a payment. And if you did that now, when they're saying there's a shortage of police, well, if you put money into the overtime budget, you get people working, because you could put a big month in. Like when I was in close protection unit, you would finish your stint of overtime. There'd be always somebody looking to get away. You could do an extra stint. You put a big month in, and that pays for a nice holiday, so which you book for 2 months in advance, and then the last few weeks before it, you put another big stint in, and there's your spending money. You could create your salary. And I think, if they were to do that in an NHS and say to the doctors and nurses, instead of starving them of cash, tell you what, guys, how about we keep these X-ray machines and these scanning machines? We run them till midnight. Anybody up for overtime, we'll pay you time and a half or whatever, rather than putting stuff out to agency nurses and that.
Where they spent it normally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But no, it was good over there. The camaraderie, the force itself were just so professional. And the population, they're just so resilient.
So
You know.
living there, living in, like, obviously when you're not working, you're living there, and you've got your family there and everything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine what it was like living under that threat, having your family there. I mean, we've gone through it, and you'd have gone through it while you were in the army. Go out, check your car, stuff like that. And things did happen. Guys were killed in Colchester. People were killed in Germany, families and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And you were quite vigilant, but I couldn't imagine the pressure that would be on yourself living there with that. The
You, you
hyper-vigilation. Or, is that the right word? I'm not sure.
well, when I first went over there, I'll never forget the very first day, because I drove across on the ferry, and of course I had mainland plates on the car,
Right.
and there was very few mainland cars around at the time. and I was paranoid then about it, because my only experience had been in the military, and then the 24 hours I'd come across for the transfer. And when you went into the training centre, they actually offered you this package for undercar booby traps. They fitted this electronic device to the cars. They recommend everybody get it. So I got it, and that was a series of lights which were hidden, and you knew where to look. But it was early days of the technology, so a certain light combination indicated that there could be something magnetic under your car, but they were always flickering, so they weren't great. So you still had to check.
Yeah.
And initially, I was staying with a friend until I rented a house, and I rented a house, and at the time, most people were living in, a lot of the police were living in sort of, if you like, their own ghettos.
Yeah.
So you had the Republicans lived in their areas, loyalists lived in their areas, and then security forces lived in certain areas as well. So the likes of, no secret, Hollywood North Down was very popular. The sort of outside of Portadown, Rich Hill, and that was popular. Up north, sort of Limavady, Portstewart, Portrush, all those places were popular with security forces, So you were removed directly from the direct threat of sort of living in Belfast or living down the country as such. And then it was, you pretty soon learnt in the area who was security forces. I moved quite regular, not for security reasons, but just to step up the housing ladder, as you could do in those days. And I ended up in a cul-de-sac, and there was one prison officer, 3 of us police, and 1 Royal Irish. So there's like all of us in one cul-de-sac.
A barrier at the end of the road.
Well, yeah, almost, and you imagine as well that this was quite a large new development, that a lot of the cul-de-sacs would be pretty much the same, But what I did find, and this might sound a little strange, was that the times when morale was the highest was when things were happening. So the short stint I did in uniform and that in the early days, on your rest days, the section always went out together, and there was so much going on. So, like the Stormont Hotel, I think, always had a really good disco on a Tuesday. There was a place in Bangor on a Thursday. There was somewhere else, and everybody flooded to them, and there was a really good party and morale atmosphere. And then when the sort of, if you like, as the force started to get smaller and peace kicked in, and that, people didn't seem to socialise as much, Just, I don't know why, or maybe I was just in a different part of the force at that point where we didn't socialise as much. But I always thought morale was a lot higher when things were happening.
It's like what you said earlier about the squaddies stuck in barracks and stuff like that. It's a very slim comparison, but it's kind of, Yeah. Towards like with you mentioned like the peace process coming in, stuff like that. How did you feel about that? I mean, obviously you wanted it to come in, but could you sense it? Did you notice it? Was it a very slow, gradual thing, or was there a sense of relief?
There was,
like in the street and anything like that as well, not just with yourselves.
Within the sort of community that I hung around in, a lot of us didn't sort of believe it and believe the motives of the other side, if you like. Not so much the Catholic community, but more the paramilitary organisations on both sides. So when I say we didn't believe the motives, that's not just a PIRA, that's the UDA, the UVF, the lot of them, because we knew that the organisation that we worked for within our department had been so efficient in what it had done, and if you read across the board, or some of the stated cases that have been in the news about informants, you look at the private secretary to Jerry Adams, a guy called what's his name, Donaldson. He was an informant, and that's
Didn't want
the
to ask.
private secretary, and then you look at Scappaticci, the head of or shall we say alleged informants, shall we, just to keep it right. And Scappaticci, the head of the internal security, the guy hunting their informants is allegedly an informant. There's a whole steak knife book out there. Derek Donaldson, I think it was Derek Donaldson, was Jerry Adams' private secretary. And if you go back to all of the footage of the Good Friday agreements and the peace processes, you'll see this guy always with Jerry Adams, dark hair receding, a little bit of a tash, always around with Jerry Adams. And allegedly he was an informant, and in fact he was murdered when he moved to Donegal, So the infiltration, and likewise on the loyalist side, was huge,
Yeah. Did you find any of that vice versa, like them getting into use as well? Was any of that made apparent, or did you ever discover any of that?
Within our department, the selection process and the procedures for getting people in, there was nobody that you would have suspected. I think within the police force itself, knowing how Sinn Féin work, I would not be surprised that they hadn't put people in towards that latter stage as, if you like, as potential sleepers, to rise up the ranks, and that. Who knows? I mean, they've always fought a long campaign, and they've always thought ahead and been way ahead tactically. Strategically, I think, isn't it? Or strategically, when you're thinking that long term. So I've maybe if they're not active for them, hold sympathy, shall we say? I wouldn't be surprised at that.
I mean, with the Good Friday going on and stuff like that, and then the normalisation coming in, I always felt that they were pushing back, like the provisionals and the UVF, and they were pushing back because they were losing power not as a paramilitary organisation, but as a criminal organisation. They were losing, because I mean that's what they were in the end, really. They weren't just paramilitaries; they were dealing drugs and whatever, all the other stuff. But they were losing that power as well.
Yeah, and they were losing status within the community because what happened. One of the byproducts is that, and you remember the old tribal maps you used to see where you had Belfast divided in green and orange. Well, those areas started to blur. People started to move out. People would move out to the other areas. So that when you had the military patrolling, both sides, both paramilitaries controlled their communities. Be it through punishment beatings, punishment shootings, intimidation, or also the communities were loyal to them because they felt that the military's tramping all over them here, so they would give them information on that. Right. Once you've removed the army from the streets and people can see that things are getting better, then they don't feel the need to be, if you like, in hock to the paramilitaries or to be beholding to them.
Or scared of them.
Yeah. So once you move out from those areas and you're not under that influence, then a lot of the paramilitaries then have lost their status within the community. It's we initially were busy as the peace process transpired. Then it got a little bit quieter, and then as the sort of various paramilitary organizations fractured, and then you got splinter groups, and we became busy again. And as well as that, the reporting that was coming in wasn't as accurate. You know, you know, it wasn't just the physical side of security, which was run down, shall we say? And I thought, very much like the world today, when you had the Cold War and you had that divide, you had the Soviet Union, Warsaw Pact, and you had NATO. Everybody knew where they stood. Yeah. We'll spy on you, you spy on us, but we know where we're sitting, and that's
almost like a gentleman's agreement type of thing.
Yeah, and what it was like when the Trouble's on, we knew we're working against this group and we're working against that group, and when that was taken away, and then you've got all these little groups forming, and that, then it was very much, well, where do we go here? Where are we going to get this from? Where's the information's coming from? And especially in the backdrop where a lot of people are saying we don't need the security presence, we don't need the intelligence gathering anymore because we're all going to live together in peace and harmony. Well, we all know that that's, as admirable as that is, it's not actually the reality. So, we then became really busy again.
I mean, as much as I've never been over there since, I've been on tour. I was talking to a guy last week. I was interviewing him, and he went over there for a business trip. And as he was going, he had to go from Belfast, and they were having a bit of time off there as well. So he took his wife over and that as well. So they were stopping in Belfast, and they had to go down to Dublin. So he decided to go to, into Cady and places like that where he'd served. And he was mentioning one place where the singer was and overlooked the pub. So he was like, I'd always wanted to. He said, the amount of times I'd stood in that singer and looked at people coming in and out of that pub, I wanted to go in it and just see what it was like inside.
Yeah.
So he took a detour and he went and he walked into the pub with his wife, and he said it was lovely. It was really, really nice. So he just went straight to the bar, and she's like, "What are you doing?" He went, "No, it'll be all right." And he ordered 2 drinks, and the guy looked at him and went, "Are you English?" And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, "Right, go and sit over there." And sorry, I'll say that again. He says, "Are you English?" He went, "Yeah, I'm ex-army. I used to be in the," and it just blurted out when we didn't mean to say it.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he said it, he thought, "Shit." And the guy looked at him and went, "Go and sit down." And he came over and brought his drinks over and sat with him and said, "Do you know something?" He goes, "We've got nothing against you in this village." He goes, "We love the fact that you were here. Don't worry about it." And sat with him for about half an hour chatting and everything like that. And then he went back behind the bar. He went to the toilet, come out, and there was 2 young lads stood in there. And as he looked over, the barman was going like, fingers across the throat, shaking him, going, "Leave," type of thing. So he was like, "Shit, don't even bother finish your drink, pet. We're off." So there's still the animosity, the threat. There's still because it's not in the news every day. We're not seeing it anymore. There's still shit happening over there, and we don't just get told about it.
I mean, I can remember being in Keady, and it must be about, I don't know, 2010, 2012, and I'd been dropped in at the station for something that we were doing, and the uniform guys said they were going out for Chinese. And there's Chinese in the village, do we want anything? And it was me and the other guy said, "Oh yeah, give them some money, told them what to get." And it was over an hour before they were back, and I was thinking, it took some time. I said, like, "Guys, did you get a call or something?" He said, "No." He said, "We can't use Chinese there." So we had to go to Armagh to get the Chinese, it wouldn't serve them in the village. And that's way, way past the Good Friday Agreement time.
There's still that divide.
Yeah.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll get much, much better. But I don't think it ever will.
I think it's when you scratch the surface and the old animosities there across the board, But I've been back to Belfast a few times, and the bars and the restaurants there now, and live music. It's vibrant, A really, really good city to visit, And I suppose there's a lot of guys out there that did tours that wouldn't mind going back, you know.
That was the
And
conversation I had with him. I'd like to go back and see certain things, just to see how they've developed since then. If have the places got better. I mean, I don't know whether it's putting demons to bed and stuff like that or whatever, and how people feel about it. But like that,
and
Northern Ireland, Bosnia, places like that, I'd like to go back there and see places.
and and if it's done right, and obviously with a little bit of caution,
Mm.
I mean, I took there's he's become a very good friend now. He's still a good friend, and he organised a memorial for our two guys that were killed on the 30th
Mm.
anniversary, and he wanted to go and see because he hadn't been there in the time. So I took him across to. I went up to Buncrana Road, and then we came down through Strabane. We crossed over into the south, came back through Crossmaglen, stopped off where Captain Nairac
Yeah.
was abducted at the Three Steps pub, and it was about lunchtime then. There was only one car outside, and we were so tempted to go in and try and grab a quick half, and it was like, you know what, the last time,
No,
so we did that.
yeah, I'd
Um,
have been tempted myself to be honest, but
and then we drove up, went to Lochgall, and we met a guy there who'd been there on the
mm,
night, who gave us a walk and talk through Lochgall,
wow,
which, yeah, was quite special. And then we went on to Portadown, where we met a guy who's written a very, very good book, The Secret War in Northern Ireland, How We Defeated the IRA. A guy called William Matchett, it's a really good read. It's a very,
I've
very good
I've
book.
heard the name before. I don't know why.
It's a very good book, well worth a read. And then stayed with a friend that night, and then did all of Belfast the next day. The falls, Shankill, and that, and then back on the plane. So you can do a whistle stop, and
Yeah,
it's well worth it. You should go back.
yeah, I might. It's building the courage up, saving them. So you were coming to the end of your time in the RUC then?
Yeah. So with I transferred my military pension, so and that I had so it's for pension in the place is 30 years, but with the military I had and a little bit of time I had from the mainland. So 2015 saw me uh, being able to claim the pension. So because I had a child who was approaching sort of end of normal school, and only knew Northern Ireland, I wanted to give them a chance to see outside of Northern
Mm.
Ireland and just see what it was like on the mainland, and that coincided with the next level of schooling. So it made an awful lot of sense to come across to the mainland, and then if they ever want to go back, they can go
Mm.
back. But this is what life's like on the mainland, and thankfully, absolutely thriving here on the mainland. You know,
Oh, that's good.
lost the accent and everything, which is a bit of a shame, uh, but it was just to show that even in the schooling system, we get forms home from school. Is your child Protestant or Catholic?
Yeah.
And they're just like I refuse to fill it out, and next minute you get the red letter. You got to fill this out. So I put down that she was a Jedi Knight.
It's a recognised religion, no?
Exactly. Well, I got a letter back from the school saying you got to take this seriously because. I forget the figure, but there's a figure that you can say X amount of people in the population are Jedi Knights. I just said, "Are you telling me that the child's not free to practice the chosen religion at your school?" And we never heard anything more about it.
I mean, that'd be
Um,
quite a scary thing to have to admit, especially if you didn't want to. Because I mean, I'd heard stories before. Again, listening to your previous podcast about how the schools, the teachers, whichever side they were on, they were passing that information on, and
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes
them
they would
gathering their
play.
information and that.
What does mommy and daddy do for a living?
Yeah.
And what we have to acknowledge as well is how good the other side's intelligence was, particularly Pyra. Their intelligence gathering was very, very good. From the initial dickers that they had out on the street when they were planning an operation or when they were deploying, right through to obtaining number plates, car details, leaving security force bases, be it phone records. If anybody dialed the police exchange asking for an extension number, I'd heard rumours that that number was then passed across. So as all the time when we were gathering intelligence, they were gathering intelligence, and you can see it by the amount of off-duty police that were killed at home, off-duty UDR or Royal Irish as became and prison officers.
Oh,
So
I wouldn't say take your hat off to them, but you knew they were good, and they were good at what they did. Unfortunately, it is what it is. Well, it was what it was. But you have to kind of respect them for that, and also hate them. But
yeah, and I mean the loyalists didn't seem to have that ability, or didn't want to have the ability. They were a lot more random. You look at Greystale and Locken Island, where they just went in and hosed a bar, which was frequented by Catholics. And I mean, and then I think that was another aspect as well. I think that a lot of the Catholic communities were flagging that up to the paramilitaries as well, saying, they're just walking in and shooting up pubs here. Anybody could be a target, and where Pirate did have an incel, they did target people, and they, some of the spectacular jobs that they did pull off.
I mean, I wouldn't have said they were careful to not cause civilian casualties, because they did. Well, like you're saying, going into a bar and just spraying it full of bullets. I mean, I'm not sure whether they did that or not. I don't remember anything. But I'd imagine at some point they did.
Maybe again, nothing like that springs to mind. They were a lot more subtle and
Clinical.
surgical, and clinical. I mean, probably the only equivalent, but doesn't even come into the same realm, is when they were attacking some of the towers and the outlying areas and the borders, but that they knew then that they were going up against military rather than just shooting civilians in the bar like the loyalists did.
I mean, the civilian, the loyalist paramilitaries, I always thought that they were quite brutal.
Yeah.
What they did, and you had like people like the Shankill butchers, but I mean that was more. They had psychological problems as opposed to being sectarian. Because I mean, I'd heard about that. I mean, that was long before I joined. I think it was before I joined the army, and I was working one of my full screws at the time was from the Shankill, and he would tell us stories about that. What it was like around that area then when he was a kid, and he was just like, Jesus Christ, it was on both sides. Speaking to guys on the podcast who worked out there in the late '60s, early '70s, and all the way up to the mid '70s, and it was different. You had to pull the army out so far, otherwise, let the RUC take over, because it was just turning into a war.
Just like like the guys I work with who'd seen the darkest days of the Troubles, and you can't imagine what they went through. Like I say, I was way late to the party. I caught the tail end of it, and enjoyed it. But you would sit down with these guys and they would talk about squad mates that they'd lost. I don't think anybody that had been in more than 5 years that I knew hadn't lost somebody.
And it's got to take a psychological effect. I would imagine everyone who served in the RUC knows someone who's lost. They've lost, and
Yeah,
it's got to play on them. I think I don't know if I've read it right. I think there's more ex-RUC have took their own life in comparison to the armed forces. Like number for number, the percentage.
yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't beg a belief really.
I mean, I know three that I knew personally that did, and like I say, I didn't know that many people. So you could be right on that.
It's a sad fact of life type of thing, but it's not right in the end, is it? Going on to that, how did the IUC deal with like people who had PTSD, psychological issues, and stuff like that? Is it we always go back and ham on about the military in the UK where pull your socks up, you'll be all right, son. They're better now. They weren't then. Not even when I was in. That was 11 years ago. They were
But
getting better, but they weren't.
the guys I talked to that were involved in incidents, back before I went out there, said, they'd be taken into the inspector's office and given a glass of whiskey and asked if they were all right, and and sort of maybe given the rest of the shift off for that. But when I went across in '93, I remember that the force had an occupational health unit, and I think it was the first force in the country to have this occupational health unit for both mental and physical well-being. And they were available to you. And if we were ever involved in the department in a compromise, you were always offered a consultation with occupational health.
Yeah, that's good.
So
Well, it's better.
yeah.
Something's better than
So,
nothing, really, isn't it? Yeah.
but again, very much like yourself, a lot of us come from that era where it was drummed into you not to talk about it, and that you don't.
Yeah.
And I think as much as you can put any amount of um, uh, assistance and help in place, but if it's the old horse to water, you can't make them drink. And I think the more awareness that's out there, and the more people that come forward who have maybe had high profile military careers. I know a few of the SF guys have come out and said that they've sought help, and I think it's now that's filtered down, and people are more willing
It's
willing to
the
talk.
reason I've become more aware of it, not only because I've lost friends in the last few years through suicide, the is talking to people doing these podcasts. The amount of lads who I've spoken to, and like I said to you before we started, most of them have been people I knew in the army. Some of them haven't, but most of them have. And the majority of them have all said towards the end of the interview I did with them and stuff like that that they've suffered with mental health issues, either in the time in the army and tried to hold it in, and it became more apparent afterwards, or after they've left the army and it's happened then, and they're only now talking about it. Some of them, a couple of the guys, it was the first time they'd ever spoke about it, was actually talking to me because they felt
Yeah,
as
yeah,
though it was the time to deal with it or whatever. And I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. I'm not a therapist, type of thing.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
people need to do it. We need to talk about it more, uh, collectively as well as individually.
And I think even if that's just somebody chatting to an old comrade, an old
Yeah,
mate, you know, and that mate saying, actually, I never thought about that incident or that, but yeah, come to think of it, yeah, that, and it's just that, if you like, unburdening or
mm,
unloading, uh, and because I think a lot of people think PTSD is always going to be really obvious symptoms, like lack of sleep, not looking after yourself, having, worst cases, some kind of breakdown and ultimately taking your own life. But I think, it's everybody's got it a little bit different, and to a lesser degree. And, you don't have to have been involved in the most horrendous contact or the most horrendous explosion to have it. You might not have been directly involved in anything, but that's a culmination of the time that you were under that pressure that you maybe even weren't aware of at the time that manifests itself. And I think it's one of the difficult aspects maybe of even acknowledging or treating it is that there's no one size fits all. There's no one solution. There's no, it's not like the signs and symptoms are the same. If you say you have, measles or chickenpox, you know what to look for. This is what it's going to be. I think it can manifest itself in different ways in different people, and then obviously then the treatment or the management of it, because I don't think you fully ever treat it. I think it's a managed process that that's required.
Well, we're up to 2 hours 10 minutes.
Cheers.
Yeah, I think I've exhausted all my questions for you, really.
Well,
if there's any,
thanks again, and I haven't done.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything else you want to just say, or
I think when I the grounding I got in junior leaders, I think, and the values that I picked up there, and the things I learned there, and then the short time I had in a gun battery, and I've always been lucky. There's always been really good role models. 2 good sergeants in junior leaders. They got to the time on the guns, absolutely hated it, but I had a really good number 1, who did look after us. Then I got into special OPs, worked with amazing guys there. And then in my time in the RUC, I met some amazing people. And I think I've always just had that little bit of luck to have good people around that look out for you and take an interest and give you good advice, and I know guys who've had such difficult paths in the military that they just seem to always be involved in really horrendous incidents, and I think I've managed to navigate a way through by luck, good fortune or whatever, and having good people around to look out for you, But the values that you get in those early days and that grounding, I think, takes you up,
And for me personally, I'm only just seeing it now as I'm older. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think you're right there. You don't realize. I mean, I always, like I say, didn't like the time on the guns and that, but I look back now, and when you're older and you're wiser, and you realize the professionalism of those guys and their endurance and their their capacity just to put up with what because I remember the guys used to say, I thought they joked about it, that when they got the 107s, they were offered electric suits from the Americans, and there was also like a cage and a canvas frame that went over for the winter. And they were offered the British Army were offered all this and said, "Oh, we don't need it because we're only going to have them a short time because we'll get MLRS." And never ever happened, And those guys, I mean, it was just brutal,
Right, I'm going to end the recording now then. So thanks for being a guest on this episode. It's been absolutely brilliant. So I hope you liked this episode. I found it very interesting talking to Andy, and I hope you did as well. It just shows that things on the other side are not always the same. If you like this episode, please share it on your social media. Please leave a comment on wherever you're listening to it, whether it be on YouTube or Spotify. It just helps to promote the episodes. With more interaction, comments and likes and stuff like that, it ends up getting pushed out to a lot more people. Well, I'll look forward to the next episode, and I'll let you know what that is on my social medias. Alright, thanks for listening. Bye-bye now.